Can you forgive betrayal? I believe the word forgive doesn't quite fit here. You can come to terms with betrayal, or you can't. If a person has come to terms with it, that doesn't mean they have forgiven it. Betrayal cannot be forgiven. It will always remain a ghost in your life. When someone decides to cheat, they must understand, if the truth comes out, and it always does, forgiveness won't follow. Somehow, people, especially women, don't understand that. A man, if he truly is a man and not just a body with an organ, will never forgive betrayal and never live peacefully with it. Living with a woman who has betrayed you is like smoking someone else's cigarette butts. The reasons behind betrayal don't matter. Excuses like, "You didn't love me," "You didn't satisfy me," "You didn't see me as a woman," don't work. If life with your husband doesn't suit you, get a divorce. But most women want both, to stay married and still chase butterflies on the side. A woman who cheats lives in a state of constant infatuation, which she mistakes for love. Children, long years of marriage, all that no longer matters to her, especially if her lover is younger. In the end, the husband finds out, and she leaves with her head held high to her beloved, destroying everything she once built. The so-called beloved usually doesn't last long. Then comes the sobering. Tears, hysteria, visits to the ex-husband. Suddenly she remembers she has children. She drags them into the storm too. Any means will do, from manipulation to emotional blackmail. But from a once happy family, only ashes remain. What was lost can never be rebuilt.
My mother left me and my father when I was a little over 2 years old. My father never remarried and gave me all the love he had. His sister, Aunt Olga, helped raise me. Every summer I would stay at her cottage and play with her children, Nina and Vadim. When I was 17, my father died suddenly. I was left completely alone.
After finishing school, I enrolled in the Leningrad Artillery Academy. My cadet years began. Where my mother was, what she did, I didn't know, and honestly, I didn't care. I knew she was gone and she would never come back. I felt nothing toward her. Once I found her photo in an album, but my father took it away. From that day on, nothing in the house reminded me of her. After graduating from the Artillery Academy, I served in the army for a while before being assigned as an instructor to an African country. I was 23, full of confidence, as if the whole world lay open before me. It was my first time abroad. It felt like an adventure. My task was to train local soldiers in artillery operations. I commanded a mortar crew, and there was a translator with me as I didn't speak the local language. Africa greeted me with heat, dust, and the heavy scent of trees after rain. The people were friendly, though cautious.
I served there for almost a year and a half. Sometimes it felt as if I would spend my whole life there. But one day, returning from training, I broke the main rule: never drink from local wells. The heat was unbearable, my throat was dry, and I couldn't resist. A few days later, I grew weak, feverish, and my eyes turned yellow. The diagnosis? Hepatitis. I was urgently sent back home for treatment. The flight home felt like a dream on the edge of delirium, my head buzzing, my body aching, but deep down I felt an odd sense of relief, as if fate itself whispered, "It's time to go back."
I spent about 2 months in the hospital. The illness dragged on painfully, but the time wasn't wasted. That's where I met a young nurse named Claire. She wasn't the kind of woman who drew attention, quiet, attentive, with a soft voice. Her eyes were warm gray-green, her hair light and wavy, strands escaping from under her white cap. We talked often, at first about trivial things, then about life. Her smile calmed me. Her presence brought life back into me. It seemed to me that the whole world had narrowed down to her.
When I began to recover, we spent more and more time together. She would meet me in the hallway, bring me tea, linger longer than she should. I waited for her shifts like for holidays. Soon we started dating. Everything felt simple and right, as if this was the happiness I had only heard about in songs. By the time I was discharged, we were married. I was assigned to a posting in the Baltics, and Claire came with me. We rented a small flat near the base. For the first time, I felt I truly had a home.
Soon, our son was born. We named him George, a tiny bundle of life that turned my world upside down. I dreamed of a big family, of having a daughter, but Claire was firmly against it. "I'm still young. I want to live for myself," she said. That was the first warning bell, but I didn't notice it then. I was too happy, too blind to see the shadow behind the light.
The army consumed me. Deployments followed one after another, by duty, by order, without the right to choose. There was less and less time for family. Sometimes I came home for just a few days, like a guest, bringing gifts, trying to make up for my absence with care and attention. But each time, it felt like an invisible wall was growing between us. I spoke, she stayed silent. I laughed, she looked away. I began to sense that my presence burdened her. I tried not to see it, told myself she was tired, sleepless, lonely. But one day I realized we were living like strangers.
Then came another deployment. I thought I'd be gone for a month. It turned into almost half a year. During that time, I wrote letters, I called, I waited. My letters went unanswered. Silence became my only reply. Only once did I receive an envelope, a few lines. "Hope you're well. George is fine." That was all. No warmth, no emotion, just obligation. For the first time, I felt there was a gulf between us. The service went on as usual, but my thoughts always returned home. Something inside me whispered, things aren't the same anymore.
Finally, it ended. I handed over my duties, signed the papers, and got a short leave. Only one thought kept echoing in my head. Home. Home to my family. To my son. On the train, I couldn't sit still. My heart beat like a boy's. When I reached the house, the first thing I saw was George in the yard, playing with toy cars under the neighbor's watch. I called out to him. He froze, looked up, then shouted, "Daddy!" and ran toward me. His little arms wrapped around my neck. I hugged him tightly, and for a moment, the world filled with light again.
"Daddy," he repeated, laughing. "Daddy Connor promised to buy me a big red car." I froze. "Connor?" I asked quietly. "Daddy Connor, he loves me, and we're going far away soon," George said cheerfully. I stared at him, unable to speak. "Are you my uncle?" he added, looking puzzled. "I'm not your uncle, I'm your father," I said, my voice trembling. "No, my dad is Connor. Mom said so," he replied with childlike certainty. Inside me, everything turned to ice.
We went inside. George ran to his room. I set my bag down and heard the front door slam. Claire had returned. I stood still. She walked into the kitchen, forcing a smile. "Welcome back, Simon," she said brightly. "I'll fix dinner." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see the woman I once loved. "No need, Claire. Sit down. We need to talk." She froze, then slowly sat down. "How long have you been with Connor?" I asked calmly. "How did you—" she whispered. "Doesn't matter. How long?" "Almost a year. I don't even know how it happened. With him, I feel like a woman, a loved woman. You're never home." Her voice rose to a shout. "Stop, Claire. You made your choice. I'll file for divorce. This is military housing. Find yourself a place to live."
She said nothing. I stood up, grabbed my duffel bag and cap. "Aren't you even going to ask who he is?" she shouted after me. I shrugged, opened the door and stepped out. Inside, there was no anger, no pain, only cold emptiness. Outside, a light drizzle fell. I walked without feeling the ground beneath me. That evening, something inside me died, forever.
At the hearing, Claire played the victim. She cried, spoke of her cruel husband, how I was never home, how I humiliated her. She said I had a lover. With whom, where, when, didn't matter. The neighbor, the same one who used to watch George, confirmed her story. She couldn't look me in the eye. I listened, feeling an odd calm. I even felt respect for her persistence, her acting. She had turned herself from the guilty one into the victim, from a family destroyer into a martyr. The judge, an older woman, looked at her with sympathy and at me with quiet condemnation. The verdict was predictable: divorce, child support, and the clause, not to approach the son without the mother's permission.
When we left the courthouse, it was snowing. Claire walked beside me, eyes down. I stopped and looked at her. "Aren't you ashamed?" I asked quietly. She said nothing. I shrugged, turned, and walked away. My soul felt empty. No pain, no anger, just cold. I realized that no matter what she said or did, I could never feel anything for her again.
I moved into the officers' quarters. A small room, a bed, a table, a few photos. Sometimes colleagues gave me sympathetic looks, but no one asked questions. In the army, you don't talk about personal matters, especially about things like this. I lived quietly, without drama, without complaints. I worked as before. Only at night, when the light went out, the room felt too large and the silence too loud.
A month passed. One evening, there was a knock on my door. I opened it. Claire stood on the threshold. "May I come in?" she asked quietly. "Come in," I said. She sat on a chair, avoiding my eyes. "Your son will soon have nowhere to live," she said. "We've been told to vacate the flat. They offered us a shack on the outskirts, no heating." I said nothing. I had warned her about this. "You have a flat in your city. Sell it. Help your son," she demanded. "And help you and your lover at the same time?" I smiled. "Sorry, Claire. You knew what you were doing. You're a bastard," she cried. "To turn your back on your own son." "Son," I repeated. "Are you sure it was me who turned away?" She didn't answer. I opened the door. "Leave, Claire, and make sure I don't see you again."
Another 2 weeks passed. The porter called me. "There's a woman waiting for you." I went out. By the entrance stood Claire, holding George by the hand. "Could you look after him for a while? Connor and I are leaving. Once we settle, I'll take him back." I looked at her silently. "What, your boyfriend's tired of someone else's kid?" I asked calmly. She turned her eyes away. I crouched down, looked at my son. "Don't worry, little one. Everything's going to be fine." He hugged me tightly. A few minutes later, Claire left, without even saying goodbye, and she never came back.
So began a new life. Without a woman, but with my son. It was hard, especially at first. At night, George would call for his mother, and I would stay silent, stroke his head and wait for him to fall asleep. Then came school, studies, sports. I became everything to him: father, friend, mentor. Sometimes it felt like I was living for someone again, just as my father once lived for me.
Years passed. George grew up. He was smart, calm, a little reserved. There was something of me in him, the same restraint, the same inner strength.
I rarely spoke to him about his mother. He hardly asked. I think he understood everything on his own. When he turned 17, he said he wanted to enter the military academy. I didn't try to talk him out of it. I just looked at him and said, "If that's your choice, go. But remember, a uniform doesn't make a man. Honor does." He nodded, and in his eyes I saw the same determination I once saw in my father's.
The years of service passed quickly. I was transferred closer to home, to my hometown. By that time, I held the rank of Brigadier General. I was appointed head of a military academy. Funny, in the same place where I once was a cadet, I now commanded. Life had come full circle. The work was hard, but it mattered. By evening, I was exhausted, but it was a good kind of exhaustion. Sometimes I'd sit by the window at night, drink tea, and think. It wasn't for nothing. All of it. The pain, the loneliness, the silence. It all brought me here.
One evening, I went into a supermarket to buy some bread. Just an ordinary evening, nothing special. At the checkout, I saw a tall woman with perfectly styled hair and an expensive coat. At first, I didn't believe my eyes. It was Claire. She recognized me too. For a second, surprise flashed in her eyes, then contempt, followed by a faint smile. "Oh, Simon? Didn't expect to see you. Looks like life hasn't been too kind to you." "Depends on what you call kind," I replied calmly. "Well, at least you're not homeless," she smirked. "If things ever get too bad, come by. I can spare you a bowl of soup." I looked at her, nodded, took the card she offered, and without looking, dropped it into the nearest bin.
A couple of years later, I was flying to George's graduation ceremony. At the airport, I noticed a familiar figure, and I wasn't mistaken. Claire. She was with a man in uniform, a colonel in his 50s, with a self-satisfied face. She noticed me, tensed slightly, then smiled. "Oh, that's my former colleague, Simon," she said to the colonel. He smirked. "You're in the service too? What rank?" "He was a captain," Claire quickly replied. I smiled. "No, just a lieutenant." The colonel chuckled smugly and buried himself in his newspaper. Claire looked pleased. When the plane landed, a young officer approached the steps, saluted sharply, and said, "Sir, your car is waiting." I nodded and glanced briefly at Claire. The colonel went pale. She stood frozen, unable to speak a word.
The next day was the graduation ceremony. Parade uniforms, an orchestra, a line of cadets. George stood in the front row. An officer, my son, my pride. I looked at him and felt my throat tighten. After the ceremony, he came up to me. Claire stood beside him. "You don't mind that I came to congratulate him, do you?" she asked nervously. I looked at my son. "Son, this is your mother," I said. George looked at her for a long moment and said quietly, "I don't have a mother. The woman who was died a long time ago." He took my arm and we walked toward the car. I turned back. Claire stood still, her hands pressed to her chest, watching us go. And in that moment I understood, betrayal cannot be forgiven. You can only learn to live with it if you still have your honor.
After everything that happened, life goes on. People marry, divorce, build and destroy families, fall in love, lose, and start over again. And I live quietly, without unnecessary words, without useless regrets. Sometimes I think maybe it wasn't all in vain. Maybe I had to go through it to understand who I really am, because pain is a filter. It burns away the unnecessary and leaves only what's real.
George serves now. He carries honor, resolve, dignity, everything that makes a man a man. I look at him and know my life wasn't lived in vain. He doesn't speak in big words, doesn't complain, doesn't blame anyone. He just does his duty. And in that, I see everything I tried to teach him. Sometimes he visits me. We sit in silence, drink tea, talk about the weather, about the service, and between the words, silence. But in that silence, there's respect, love, and everything that doesn't need to be spoken aloud.
I don't think about Claire anymore. Sometimes her face flickers in a passing crowd, and somewhere deep inside, a quiet shadow of the past stirs. Not pain, not anger, just memory. She probably lives somewhere in her own world, remembering her youth, inventing excuses. Let her. I wish her no harm, but there is no forgiveness either, because betrayal cannot be forgiven. You can only learn to live with it if you still have your honor.
We all make mistakes, but betrayal is not a mistake. It's a choice. And every choice has consequences. Some pay with pain, others with emptiness. And if there's even a drop of conscience left in you, you'll never ask for forgiveness, because you know it doesn't exist.